Hello, friends, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we are going to be talking about 15 movies that made me cry. I thought since it was, nighttime and we're getting kind of cozy because my room is very cozy during the evening, that we could talk about some things that, when you want to cuddle up, have a good cry to a movie, and I will say that there are a few movies on this list that could potentially be triggering depending on who you are and what your triggers are. So I will mention that, and I will tell you which movies I believe have triggering content. But otherwise, I think a lot of the tears that I cried for different films were, for very different reasons. So hopefully there's something on this list that maybe interests you, and I don't know, maybe you shed a tear too. But starting off with the first one, this one is the one that inspired this list because I recently watched it, and that is The Whale. This movie is so good. I did not expect to like this movie. I'm not a huge fan of movies that seem to be sort of overplayed or, that everyone's talking about all the time. I know this movie came out in 2022 maybe. So I know it's been out for a few years, but I'm just always slow on the uptake. Anyway, the movie, if you are unfamiliar, is about a morbidly obese man who sort of reconnects with his estranged daughter as he nears his final moments. And I think any movie that grapples with existence and life and death and things like that, obviously is a very heavy movie. I think this movie especially made me cry because I think the way that they position him as both someone that you pity, someone that you feel bad for, and somebody that you also sort of dislike a little bit is the perfect way to position somebody as a flawed character. And that's exactly who he is. He has his flaws, and they're very, clear in this movie, but at the same time, especially you don't feel bad for him because he's now disabled because of his obesity. You feel bad because everyone in his life hates him for one reason or another, and he is living this very depressing life. And it's really sad to know that he's nearing the end of his life, and there's these people that he has unresolved issues with, and so that's sort of what the movie grapples with. It grapples with a lot of different themes. If you've read Moby Dick, there's a lot of references there, and yeah, it was a very well made film. And it got tears from me. I teared up towards the end, and then when it got to the end, I finally cried, and I was like, I just have to let this out. So the next film comes with a trigger warning for SA, but it is the movie Speak. It's based on a book. It stars Kristen Stewart. This is probably one of her best performances that she's ever done. This movie is so heavy, and she hardly speaks any words in this movie. So, you can guess that she did a lot of physical sort of acting to get the point across to us. But the movie is about this girl who is entering high school, and she struggles with what I would consider selective mutism. I also struggle with it, so she's not, it pretty much means that she's not, physically mute, but she is still able to speak physically, but psychologically she's unable to. And so she spends a lot of the movie sort of observing the people around her and grappling with the trauma that has led her to be mute towards most everyone in her life. And This movie again was like so heavy. I think anyone, and I will sort of give it away, the trauma that she's facing is SA. And I think anyone who has been SA can pretty much relate to how she feels and how she goes about it, because especially the circumstances in which it happens, it definitely would lead somebody to not want to speak up about it. And so it's just a sad movie. It's sad to watch a young girl grappling with these things. The next movie is one that's not as sad as the others. It's a very interesting and weird film. Yeah, there's a lot going on with it, but I wanted to tell the story of why this movie made me cry, and that is the movie Holy Motors. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, if you've seen the movie, you're like, why would you cry at this movie? But I will explain here in a second. If you are unfamiliar with the movie, it's kind of weird. Let me see what Letterboxd has to say about it. The Letterboxd explains it as: we follow 24 hours in the life of a being moving from life to life like a cold and solitary assassin moving from hit to hit. In each of these interwoven lives, the being possesses an entirely distinct identity, sometimes a man, sometimes a woman, sometimes youthful, sometimes old, by turns murderer, beggar, company chairman, monstrous creature, worker, family man. So yeah, it's a very interesting film, one that would be akin to an anthology almost, except for we're following the same person throughout many different stories in many different contexts. So it's very interesting. But this film made me cry because it was one of the first films that I watched when I went to college, and it was the first time I'd watched a movie and I felt like I was finally being understood as a film major, like as a film student, as someone who loves film. Like, it was one of the first films that really made me feel like I was where I needed to be. I specifically watched this movie in like a local theater that only showed like they didn't show like big box office types of movies. They showed like smaller, more indie type of movies. And so I went specifically to go see this movie because it was being played as sort of more of like an indie type of film. And so when I saw it, I was very much in the setting that you would want to be, like surrounded by people who also understand the movie. And so I think they were kind of tears of joy in a weird way, that I was just happy to feel at home finally and to feel understood, because I grew up not really being around people who understood film and how to talk about it and the depth at which film can reach. So yeah, definitely this movie has a place in my heart, a special place in my heart. The next film is one that there's a couple actually films that I feel like I'm not the audience for it, but I very much felt connected to what was happening. And this next one is one of them where I'm like, I don't know if I'm really the audience, but it's a beautiful story nonetheless. And that is Moonlight. Moonlight is such a beautiful story. It's so well made. I mean, it's a great film nonetheless, but I definitely cried during this film because I honestly think that a lot of black films, or films specifically starring black people about black people, tend to lean more into black trauma, and it makes me really uncomfortable, not because I didn't experience it and it's like this whole other thing. They make me uncomfortable because I want to see movies where black people are celebrated and where black joy can be seen on screen, and I don't want to see a bunch of sad stuff. I don't know, like it doesn't feel informative to me. And so this was one of those films that I think was an amazing portrayal of a piece of blackness that we don't get to hear about as much, which is specifically about black gay men and how that functions in the black community. And so it wasn't so much about black trauma as much as it was about that specific topic. I will read the letterboxed description because I don't know how to describe it, but the tender, heartbreaking story of a young man's struggle to find himself, told across 3 defining chapters in his life as he experiences the ecstasy, pain, and beauty of falling in love while grappling with his own sexuality. Again, just a beautiful film, and I think this film specifically made me cry because it is such an important yet unique story, and it was just beautiful. It was beautiful to finally see this type of story represented on screen. So the next film is one that I think would come with a trigger warning because I think there's just a lot of like imagery, and I think there's essay in it as well. But there's a lot of intense imagery in this film, and that is the film An American Crime. This film is based on a true story. It's about a woman and her family who are supposed to be taking care of a young girl and her sister while their parents are away. And over the course of many months, she begins to abuse one of the girls specifically, like more than the other. And the thing that made this story especially disturbing when, people heard about it was that there were children involved who were also abusing this other child, and so it was very much so, it was disturbing. And this movie got some tears from me. I didn't expect to because I'm a pretty avid true crime listener and I'd heard of this before, but the imagery just especially got to me. And I honestly think since my brother had kids, I've had such a different reaction to how children are treated and those types of stories. And so this one definitely got a couple tears from me because it just hit me harder than some other films have. I don't know. I especially think like seeing it on screen is like such a different experience than like someone just saying, "Oh, they abuse them." The next film is one that is pretty well known for its heavy topics. The content is just very heavy. I mean, a lot of these are very heavy, but yeah, this one is based on a book. It stars Winona Ryder. It is the film Girl Interrupted. This one, I don't know, it made me cry, okay? Like, I think stories about young girls dealing with abuse is just, it's hard for me. It's hard when you are the audience of something that could very well be about you, you know? Anyway, it follows a girl in the 60s who gets committed to like a psychiatric ward, and she pretty much has to grapple with, both dealing with what everyone else is there for, but also dealing sort of with her own thoughts on being committed and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it's not one of those stories where, oh, like everyone's crazy and we write them off, but it's also not one of those nobody's crazy and this is just sad because they used to do this to people for no reason. It's very much like these people are in here for a real reason, and we get to know those reasons, and it's even sadder. The next film is one of my favorite films. It makes me cry every time I watch it because I like romance that's sad. Like, I want a romantic movie to make me cry. I don't care about, like, rom-coms as much because, like, I don't really care. Like, I don't know. I don't care about, like, those goofy love stories as much as, like, when they don't get the girl. It makes me sad and I want to cry about it. And this is the Korean film More Than Blue. I've talked about this film on my channel before, and it's one of my favorite films. Like, I really do have a special place in my heart for this film, and this film made me cry, and it makes me cry every time I watch it. It's about this man who lives with his friend who's a woman, and he's very clearly in love with her, but he's dying. And so he, tries to keep his distance in, telling her, like, he's not going to tell her that he's in love with her. Like, he's very much just, like, trying to save her from the pain of having a loved one pass away. And so he's kind of trying to, like, do a little Irish goodbye, like, not tell her or anything like that. And it's just really sad because you can tell how much love he has for her, and you can tell that, like, she loves him too, like, but he pretty much sets her up to be engaged, and she's in, a new relationship, and he just wants her to be happy before he goes. He wants to leave her with the best life that he could wish for her, and that is to be taken care of by someone. And so that's what he does. And that is all I'm going to say about the movie. It's an amazing movie. Just very sweet. Yeah, it made me cry. There's so much to cry about in the movie. I mean, he's dying. Like, how can you not cry about that? The next film is one that comes with a trigger warning for EDs. That's literally what the whole film is about. So if that makes you uncomfortable, if that's triggering for you, then, like, don't watch it, like, at all. Like, don't even try to, okay? You take care of you first. But that is a film to the bone. It's about a girl struggling with her ED. It's kind of about learning. It's very similar to, like, Girl Interrupted. But this movie made me cry. She's trying to find her way amongst these other people who have EDs, and it's always strange to be, like, in a place where you're surrounded by people with a similar issue as you, but, like, there's just always varying, just, like, personalities that come out from situations like that. And so it can just be very uncomfortable, but also very eye-opening. And so, this movie just, it made me cry because, this movie made me cry because it's about EDs, and EDs are very, like, personal to me. And so the next film is one that you're gonna laugh at me for this. You're gonna laugh at me because, like, everyone cried during this film. But you know what? I didn't cry about it until I was an adult. When I was a kid, I didn't cry about this movie. But after my niece and nephew, it makes me cry. And it's Finding Nemo, okay? If you're unfamiliar, if you haven't seen Finding Nemo, it's an animated film about a clownfish and his son. And his son kind of swims out to sea, and he gets captured by a human and taken away. And he goes on a mission across the ocean to try to find him. And it's a beautiful story of a parent's love. And I think it would make anyone cry. I think if you're a parent, you'd cry. I think if you're a child thinking about being lost, you'd cry. Like, abandonment issues coming out like crazy. Like, I don't know. It's just, this movie, like seeing it again, hearing the soundtrack alone could make me cry. The next film is one that it's a love story, and I like stories like this. It's the film One Day. I believe it has Anne Hathaway in it. It's about this couple, pretty much these two people who kind of it follows them throughout the years as they try to meet up on the same day every year. And it just, there's a love story element to it, but also like, the sort of idea of like drifting apart and drifting together. And like I have someone in my life who I feel like we're kind of like that, but with friendship, where we drift in and out of each other's lives. And it just like made me think of him, and it just made me really sad. And it made me cry because I just love beautiful little stories like that where we can all imagine the kind of like romantic sort of thing of meeting the same person every year. The next film is also a love story. It's what got me into poetry, to be quite honest, because I hadn't really been like that big of a poetry fan, but yeah, something about a love story related to poetry, just like that'll get me. That's the film Bright Star. It follows Fanny Braun as she falls in love with the poet John Keats. It's based on their true love story, based on, things that actually happened and his poetry, and it's just beautiful. I'm not really a period piece kind of person, but I mean, it works for this movie, and it works so well. This used to be my Valentine's Day movie because I would try to watch it every Valentine's Day and cry to it because, I mean, if he's not writing poetry about you, what is he doing? All right, the next one is another kids movie, and you're gonna laugh at me, okay? But don't laugh at me. And that's the movie Brother Bear. This movie is so sweet. I just think about like my own relationship with my own brother, but also just having a sibling is just, it's another kind of love, you love your sibling and you do anything for them, and that's what this film is about. If you are unfamiliar, if you haven't seen Brother Bear, it is about an indigenous man, and indigenous to America, Native American, whatever. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. This guy, he gets turned into a bear, to say the least. He gets turned into a bear, and he meets this little bear, and he kind of has to he's going on like an adventure to like get to from point A to point B, but obviously it's about the journey and how he grows and changes along the way, and he creates this friendship with this smaller bear who's just so little, and it's very much like a Shrek donkey situation where he just wants to get from point A to point B, but of course in between they're becoming brothers. The brothers are bears. Bear brothers. Brother Bear. The next film is one of those films that makes me cry because it's something that I've always wanted in my life. It's like, I think it's probably every girl's dream to have this, and it is the movie Sunny. It's a Korean film. I believe I've talked about it before, but it's one of my favorite films. It's one of those great rewatches. It's a comedy drama type of film. The context for the film is that this leader of sort of a group of girls from high school is on her deathbed, and she wants the group to get together one last time as adults, and as they are looking for trying to find and get the group back together, we get flashbacks of when they were younger, and there's one specific girl who, like, we sort of follow her as she joins this group at the time, and you get to see all their fun antics, the fashion, the group dynamics and things like that. But I think most girls would say that they've always wanted to have like a large friend group where you guys just love each other. Either way, this is one of my favorite movies. I think it's really well made. I love the group dynamics. I don't know, it's just a really fun film, and it made me cry because it made me think about my own friendships and what I have wanted for my friends since I was younger. Especially because when I was little, I did have a friend group who was really close, and we would always just hang out and stuff. So I have like kind of an understanding of what that is like, and so it just reminds me of back then. The next film is one that you may think is like dumb to cry to, and I have plans to talk about it further in detail in the future, if I can get my notes together properly. But it is the film The Perks of Being a Wallflower. It stars Logan Lerman. He's one of my favorite actors. I just think he's like a cutie patootie. But it follows Logan Lerman's character as he, goes into high school. He's a wallflower. He's very, and this one also, I would say, a trigger warning for alluding to SA. They don't say it right out, but they allude to it. But more or less, he enters high school. He's a wallflower, and these two people sort of integrate him into their friend group. They really just take him in and mentor him and try to get him out of his shell. And there's a lot of good lines that they take from the book that I think are really great, but especially the one that they use in the trailer of "we accept the love we think we deserve." Like, I think that made me cry the first time I heard it, because it's just such a great quote. And the final movie is one that I believe, this is another film kind of like Moonlight, that I don't believe it was written for someone like me, but I will explain the very specific context in which I was crying to it, because I don't think I'm the audience for this film necessarily. And that is the film Call Me By Your Name. This film, it shouldn't have made me cry, okay? It's about a man and this teenager, essentially. It's about a summer where they sort of explore with one another a relationship. And for one, it's taboo for two men to love one another, but also because of like the age gap, it's kind of taboo. But not only that, it's based on a book, so there's like a lot of bookish writing, quotey type of stuff in it. But as you can see, I'm not a gay man, so like this story I don't believe was like written for me, right? But I ended up crying to this story. I ended up crying to a specific line that the father says towards the end of the film, and it just like hit me like a brick to realize that part of the story is about like first love, and kind of both first love, but also about accepting that we have to let go of certain people in our lives. And that just like really hit me, that like it was the truth, that sometimes we just have to like accept that we have to let go of people, and you can fully love them, they can fully love you, but like the time and the place are no longer right, you're no longer aligned, you're your storylines, your timelines are going in different directions, and that just made me cry. So it wasn't the movie itself, it wasn't like the overall content of the movie that made me cry. It was just like the realization that I came to at the end of the movie that just made me reflect on my own life, which I think that's a great thing for a movie to do to its audience. And I commend the film for being able to make me feel that way by the end. You know, no matter why you cry to a film, whether it's because you relate to it personally or because it reminds you of something else, or you just care about the character so much, like, the film has very clearly done its job of making you feel something one way or another. And I think that's really the important thing to take away from this. It's just that sometimes you gotta let out the emotions, and sometimes film will just do that for you. Yeah, those are all 15 films that I have for you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what films make you cry. I'd love to know what films, like, especially weird films or films that maybe you wouldn't expect to cry to. But definitely let me know down below. But that is all I have for you. I hope you have a nice, cozy evening tonight. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one.